People, welcome to Full Chest. Hope you're having a good day, top of the day to you. If you have not done so already, kindly subscribe to the channel, please. Much appreciated. All right, jumping into today's discussion with you guys. So, one question I've always had, of course, you might say you should know the answer to this, but I just want to ask the question. Why is it that a lot of African passports hold no weight? And even though they do, the citizens of the country are not proud of their passports, as opposed to the passports of the US or the EU. Now, what I'm trying to say is that most people, right, from the continent, and this is mostly with Africans. I don't see people from the Caribbean or people from Latin America do this, but most African countries, if they're like a citizen of Botswana, for example, if they get like an EU passport, they're so happy to get the EU passport. I don't understand it. Now, no shade. I'm just saying I never understand it. Be proud of your passport. Why is that? That's one question. Second question I have is that, and this is correlated to passports, right? Why is it that Africa does not regard its citizens? What do I mean by this, right? So, for example, say I'm in Switzerland and something happens and I'm arrested and I'm like the citizen of Somalia or some African country, for example. I've never heard on the news where that African country is like doing everything it can diplomatically to make sure that its citizen is treated well while in the foreign country and that everything is done to bring its people home. It's always like the private sector. For example, when the South African Nigeria thing happened, the whole xenophobia thing, it was the private sector that did more than the Nigerian government to bring back Nigerians. So it's always something that, I'm always like, why is that? And then what's up with the whole visa issue with African countries? Like since last month, there's all these visa things happening. So we're going to discuss some of these things and I'm just going to dive right in. But before I go in, quick story, right? So, and this has to do with passports. I remember my first time I went to Zambia. Great country, by the way. I love Zambia. Great people, great country, nice people. So while I was in Zambia, one thing I did, when I landed at the airport, I went with my passport. It was an African passport, an African country passport. And when I got to Zambia, I presented my passport. And I literally waited at the airport for an hour. And this lady that took my passport, right, I don't know, she was just holding my passport because it was from another African country. And she held and I was so tired. This is a long flight. Like, if you're coming from like, any North American country flying to Zambia, it's like 20 something hours. So I got so frustrated. I called her. I'm like, listen, I need to speak to your manager, whoever in charge. I need my passport. If you want me to board the flight back to the country where I came from, I will do that. I'm only here for tourism and I'm actually coming here to put money into your economy. And when she heard me talk, that's when she became very like, okay, we're gonna, and she expedited the whole process. And why am I saying that? I think that even amongst African countries, we belittle our own people and we have no regard for our own. And this happens a lot also in most African airports. There's a line for people, the line for people who are not the citizens are treated with more respect than the citizens of it, like the birth citizens of the country. It is something that I will never understand. I think is daft, and I think is one of the things that undermines Africans and African countries, and I think is born out of inferiority complex. Right. All right. So moving on. So, like I was mentioned, when Africans get US passports or European passports, they're always excited. Like we see this on TikTok everywhere. They want to show it off. It's like, oh my gosh, I've gotten a ticket to heaven. And I'm always wondering, and no shade, right? I understand that. I don't understand, but I'll understand that people like struggle to get this passport. But I'll never understand why. I guess the freedom of movement. people are able to move, travel better, and things like that, which is great. Which is the reason why they're always excited. But I challenge. I challenge, or I defer to say that it is not just about freedom of travel. I think that a lot of people, when they get these passports, they feel like they've made it in life. It's more than travel. They feel superior to their fellow Africans in one way, shape, or form. I kind of sense that sometimes, which is inferiority complex playing in their psyche as well. So when this pride kicks in, it becomes like, oh my gosh, I've got a ticket to heaven, this, and the third. And and this is a social construct that people don't know, that it's been constructed for a lot of people, a lot of Africans. And my problem with it is that I don't see this among Caribbean people. And there are poor countries in the Caribbean and poor countries in Latin America, but they seem to be more patriotic when it comes in this context than African countries. And I find it very interesting. And I think it's a social construct that has been done to make a lot of African people undermine their own self, which helps the outsiders, the colonizers, even suppress and undermine Africans and the country the more. Because when you aid the undermining process, I was about to make up my own word right there, but when you aid it, it makes it easier. Just like colonization. They had to get counterparts within the country to kind of fulfill the role or the goal of colonization. So it's a social construct that has been done, and people don't know, a lot of people don't know this, that makes the continent weak in all ramifications, and the citizens of the continent aid in this weakness vis-a-vis and with this whole passport issue. And I'm going to talk about it and also link it to the whole visa thing going on now. So, and my other question, like I asked before, is that, and which is correlated with undermining passport, is that most citizens of African countries, when they get into trouble in European countries, the government of their birth or their citizen country, they don't do anything to help them. They are very helpless. And a lot of people, Africans, have died in this aspect. And it's a shame on the continent and governments that up till today, a lot of governments or African countries do not have a mechanism to help protect their people when they are abroad. It's like you're on your own, Jojo. Whatever you want to do, since you're making money, is for yourself. But actually, a lot of Africans, when they do migrate, the remittance that they send back helps the economy of their home countries. They help the families. They end up building houses, businesses, and doing so much for their home country. Then why does their home country neglect them if something happens to them? Again, is the social constructs to undermine their own people, which has been done very well on Africans. Very, very well. Moving on. So, now one of the things that, we can say that there are no resources for governments to help their citizens when they're outside. But I think this is a lie. I think the resources are there, and I disagree. Like I mentioned, I think it's part of the game that African countries have bought into that has continued to suppress the continent and everything that has to do with the continent for such a long time. It's part of the game. And the governments of African countries have been playing this game, and they continue to play this game blindly and being used for such a long time. And I think it's time for them to wake up and to put things in place that are, which is very much possible to do. It is not far-fetched at all. Okay, now, let's look at passports, for example, right? Let's look at what are the top, passports on the continent, right? Number one is Seychelles, or Seychelles, however you want to say it, right? Seychelles holds the title for having the most powerful passport in Africa. Now, it's followed by Mauritius and South Africa. Then you have Botswana, you have Namibia. The interesting thing is that the island countries dominate this, right? And then followed by Southern African countries. And it's weird to me, and I'm going to get to this later on, how the Western countries who are the who migrate a lot, who were colonized, and they are the ones that migrate a lot, their passports are the weakest. When they are the ones that are old, or they talk about various reciprocity and things that should happen, and this is a place where a lot of Western African countries fall short when it comes to migration and the whole visa thing. Now let's look at the visa crisis that has been happening for the past couple of months. Now it's indicated that Africa lost 67.5 million to denied Schengen visa applications in 2024. 67.5 million. I think it's in euros actually, in terms of lost Schengen visa. Now, the top 10 African countries that lost most money to EU visa rejection, and I'm going to show it, right? So Nigeria came to be number one. Of course, Nigeria, of course, heavy migration. Nigeria, 4.3 million euros they lost to EU visa rejections. Then you have Senegal, you have Ivory Coast, you have Ghana, you have Cameroon. What does these countries have in common? They're all West African countries, and they are all colonies of the EU. Are you kind of seeing what I'm seeing here, right? So these countries are spending money to go and meet their colonial masters. Their colonial masters have put in place a mechanism whereby, even though colonialism has gone, they are still reaping post-colonialism off of the countries. This is a construct that was done, and it blows my mind that African leaders do not see this. Like, they are blind to this. Let me repeat that one more time. Most of the countries that lose a lot of money to migration, right, are West African countries. And where are they migrating to? They are migrating to their former colonial masters. And their colonial masters, after pesting and sucking everything during the colonial era, they are still finding ways to suck everything out, not only in the country, but also out of the individuals in the country. Yo, if this is not mind-blowing to you, I don't know what else is. This is a game that your colonizers played, and they played the long game well. And it's crazy to me that African countries are still under the spell of this. Okay, so I know now the bottom part of the list, you find some East African countries, and then you find South African countries. I know it's known that Eastern Africans and Southern African countries, they don't migrate that much, which can be a reason why their passports are kind of at the top. But I don't think that's the only reason why. I don't think that's the reason why West African countries should be at the bottom, considering the things that West Africans suffered. West Africans are part of the people who built all these countries. So it's just a crazy scheme that that has been put in place. Now let's look at some other things, right? Now, 7 African countries, let's look at some other visa things. So a couple African countries have been affected by Saudi Arabia visa scheme, as well as because Saudi Arabia, they've suspended the block work visa. So this is another visa thing that is happening as well. Now, let's see here. Like I mentioned before, the trick, the trick that has been done by the colonizer countries is that, one, they were able to trick African countries in the colonial days, and they are still being tricked in 2025, pun intended, right? And this is like a shame to all African governments for not realizing this. And then there's also this whole trend on LinkedIn about the fact that they're inferring that there should be justice for African countries because the EU is kind of taking advantage and taking all this money and denying them visa, and therefore there should be a scheme to refund this visa. Nonsense, right? I think this is just rubbish. You apply for the visa, you understand how the visa process works, you know that it's a gamble, you might get it, you might not get it. So to come and say that it should be refunded, I think that's far-fetched. I think the main thing is that African governments need to start fixing their countries, and they need to start putting in place mechanism whereby if people leave the country, they have incentive to return into the country and bring back what they've learned. This is what a lot of Asian countries do, countries in the Middle East do. Why can't Africa do this? Why? Like, you have all the resources. Again, we have a lot of European countries mining mineral resources in most of these West African countries. When you negotiate these mining deals, you want to tell me that nobody in the negotiation table, none of the diplomats, none of the economists, none of the foreign affairs specialists that we have on the continent says, hey, if we're granting you licenses to mine in our country, we need to look at the visa scheme. Why don't we have a concession that if you're bringing people to mine, first of all, you employ our people, and then we look at ways whereby we can have a mechanism whereby people travel to your country visa free, learn the work, and come back, and you ensure that those people come back to implement what they've learned. And you can also go far as, for tourism purposes, why don't we have a free visa back and forth? All these things are possible. I think they're overlooked by most of these people, most of these government people, and the immigration policies are very, very much nonsensical. So here's my full chest take, and here's my question to African countries. I think it's high time African countries understand the importance of migration and the importance of the resources and economic benefits of migration, and find a way to tap into it, and not just let people japa, according to Nigerian, and just leave the country without any mechanism put back for them to return with the human capital that they've acquired. Also, I think that African countries need to find a way to begin to make sure that they are marketing their countries in a way that it's respected. And this also has to be with the citizenry, right? Example is Rwanda. Rwanda is a country that is very neat. People go there, oh my gosh, it's so neat, is this, is this, is that. Well, it's the populace, it's the citizens that are upholding the conduct. In most West African countries, the citizens contribute a lot in demolishing the infrastructure. So they are to blame as well, not just the government. So I think that when people complain, or when people talk about this whole visa thing and this whole passport thing, I think that it's left with the government to find ways to uphold the authenticity and the respectability of their country. And the passport is one of those things that is used. It's a mechanism to start with to make sure that a country is respected. And you can only start from the inside. Burkina Faso is doing things. Other countries are doing things. So I think a lot of West African countries needs to wake up and follow suit. Let me know what you think, guys, about this whole thing when it comes to visas and visa rejection and this whole passport situation. Again, I want to emphasize that I believe that having multiple passports, it's great. No one is knocking it. But I think that it's high time that we also have a sense of pride in our own passports. And the government needs to make sure that happens in more ways than not. Once again, this is Full Chest. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, kindly subscribe. Let me hear what you guys think. I'm open to comments, suggestions, opinion. Engage with me, guys. And until next time, peace and love.